Through lyrical prose and raw storytelling, Bonét reflects on what it means to carry history as a daughter, as a mother, and as a witness. Set partly in Houston's Acres Home neighborhood, where her grandmother Betty Jean settled after migrating from Louisiana, The Waterbearers explores how the lives of Black women are shaped by inheritance, silence, memory, and transformation. It's a deeply personal story that also echoes the broader struggles and triumphs of Black families across the South. Bonét recently spoke with Houston Matters producer Laura Walker about the power of storytelling, the influence of Houston's landscape and culture, and what it means to break cycles while still honoring the women who came before you.
When I think about Waterbearers, women are typically the ones who bring the water to the village. It's kind of an international understanding and water is so essential. So the water is what we need to survive. And so when I think about Waterbearers, I wanted to kind of express how essential these women are, not just for my family, but for the nation, for America, for the founding of this nation. So it's the ones who kind of break their backs carrying what we need to the village.
And, your work is a memoir. It blends cultural criticism and history. How does the Waterbearers weave those threads together, and why was water the perfect way to do that?
I'm from Houston, and I think people just don't. I live in New York. People don't realize Houston is a water city. People think that we're landlocked. And so I felt like the water provides something for us, like it talks to us from the past. And so I wanted to speak to the past and speak to my family's experience. And I felt that the water was kind of the perfect way to go in and out of that and kind of flow into the past and to the present. And it made it really easy to transition from not just the women in my family, but the women of the cultural history of the United States, like Betty Davis, Nina Simone, and allow for a kind of continuity between my family in Houston and then the women of the country.
This is a memoir not just about yourself, but your entire matriarchal side of the family. And your grandmother, Betty Jean, gave you permission to tell her story. How did the rest of the family feel about their story being told?
That's such a good question. I think with my grandmother being our matriarch, when she gives the signal, everyone else kind of has to follow. Of course, people didn't have to speak to me. But once one person speaks, then the other person feels like my aunts felt like, okay, I need to contribute my perspective. And even though we have this, I think within the Black culture of America, we have this way that privacy and secrecy is such a part of survival. And it always has been. And so the idea of telling the family business in a book was really hard for everyone to accept. But what was also interesting is that it felt like everyone also wanted someone to ask them who they are and where they come from and what their feelings are. So it's still to today. I mean, the book isn't out yet, but it's still today something that we're struggling with.
You've written this memoir with such a strong sense of place and identity. How did growing up in Houston influence those themes that you explore in the book?
Leaving Houston allowed me to be more aware of Houston, if that makes sense. I was able to reflect in a way, and it's just in you, when I meet people from Houston all over the world, it's something that's in you. And I was trying to figure that out. I was like, what is it about us? What exactly is it about this culture in this city? And it's so specific. And I really believe the water has a lot to do with that. And also just all of the cultures blending. And my family's come from Louisiana, and so many people here in Houston come from Louisiana. But I felt like I was trying to understand myself. And in order to understand myself, I had to try to understand what was going on here in Houston. What was it that had kind of seeped into me? And there's just so much richness to this city. And there's so much, I mean, I learned a lot also in the research and just the music that was developed here. I always thought, and this may be controversial, but I always thought Zydeco came from Louisiana, but apparently it came from Fifth Ward, and it was developed by people from Louisiana here in Houston. And also just the blues of Houston, the Bayou City blues, and the way that people would love to come here and play music. And what's fascinating is the amount of culture that's left Houston, like the people who leave and create away from the city. And it's so rooted in the way we live here, the architecture, the nature, the way we gather, the community, the food, all of that is so alive within us.
And you mentioned, Betty Jean coming from Louisiana. You yourself eventually moved to New York with your daughter, Sophia. Much of the book is dedicated to Houston. What is it like for you to come back to the city now after examining your experiences in this memoir?
I have to tell you, it's so emotional in a way that it wasn't before. Even coming to visit with you, I was driving along Buffalo Bayou and I got really emotional. And Houston is very much a character in the book. It's got its own flavor, it has its own voice, and it changes. It's hard to come back without my grandmother here, I have to say. It's really hard because it feels like she was the kind of anchor. And so it is hard to come back because I see her everywhere. And there is a bit of grief.
I'm sorry for, your grandmother passing. I lost my grandmother this year, so I understand how that is. In the book, you delve into the stories of Black Panther, Fred Hampton's mother, Iberia Hampton, and her relationship to Mamie Till, Emmett Till's mother. There's, stories about Malcolm X's mother, Louise Little. Why was it important to not only tell the story of your family, but also include these stories of these historical figures as well?
I feel like in order to understand my family and even, the characters as individuals, we all kind of exist within this context of this nation, and we're all kind of building on what someone left for us, what someone else built, and then we build on top of that. And I do feel there's a way that that's present in Black culture, this understanding that you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the people before you. I write about the praying grandmother and how we're each kind of surviving off of those prayers. And I felt like I needed to put it within context because so many people don't know Fred Hampton's mother. A lot of people don't talk about Malcolm X's mother, but these men, these leaders just could not exist without these women who have, who built them up, who loved them. Even when I'm watching the NBA, for example, every player, when they get their MVP, it's all about their mother. It's their mother, usually a single mother. And so all of these kind of titans who we adore, we have to understand who helped build them.
You mentioned in the book, and it's also a study, the 1965 Department of Labor report written by Daniel Patrick Moynihan that states that single Black mothers at the time, were a significant cause of various societal problems like poverty and crime within the Black community. Your family has several single Black mothers all throughout it, including yourself. How do you feel this report represents your own experience?
The report, it doesn't represent my experience at all, which is why I felt like it was important to write about it. There is a sociologist at Harvard named Sabrina Strings who has been researching to kind of debunk this myth that single motherhood in the Black community is tearing apart the Black community, because it doesn't exist in the same way for the Black community because of the community that's built around these women and these families. So even though I had a single mother, I was with my grandmother, I was with my aunties, I was with the women at the church. So many people contributed to my upbringing, and all these women kind of band together in this way that's I took for granted as a child, but is so gorgeous. And so it's a way for, of course, the U.S. government to thwart any type of responsibility for what's happened in this nation in the past and how the Black community ended up in places like Third Ward and Fourth Ward, and how we built these enclaves, but with very little resources. So I felt like it was important to identify that these people who we love and adore and cherish are not the reason for the downfall of our communities. They're actually the reason that our communities are still together.
Throughout the book, there's these themes of like generational traumas that have like carried over from one generation to the next. What does healing look like for communities that you write about? Is water a path back to wholeness or something more complicated?
Yeah, that's such a beautiful question. I think what I hope is that the story, like the one that I've told, will help to open up more conversations. So many people's grandmothers die and they never get to hear their story because you don't ask Granny about where she came from, because you know there's so much hurt there and so much pain, and it's considered disrespectful. But I think that that's actually where the healing is. It's in the talking. It's in the telling of the stories, you know. It's in understanding and growing from each other. It's how we build compassion, not just for our elders and our mothers, but for ourselves. And I hope that with this book, it will create some intergenerational conversations that are so hard to have. I don't think without my grandmother's blessing, my mother would have talked to me in the way she did, or that my aunties would have talked to me. And what was also interesting is when I was talking to all my aunts, and it's 7 of them, they hadn't told each other these stories. So they're learning about each other through reading the book, and they grew up together beside each other, sleeping in the same bed, in the same room, and not even knowing what the other one is processing in their bodies.
And, you know, you yourself, as a mother of Sophia, what has her reaction been to the memoir so far?
You know, she hasn't read it. She's kind of like, you know, she's a kid. She's a teenager. She's 14. She's like, congratulations. I'm so proud of you. I think what's beautiful about this is that she saw me from the beginning. She was with me moving to New York, saying I wanted to study and try to become a writer. And she was beside me, so she understands what went into it. But she probably won't care much until she's older. Right now, all she cares about is listening to music and being with her friends. So she hasn't read it, but I think she understands the impact because of how our family is reacting. She's like, why is everybody kind of upset about this book?
Absolutely. When readers from Houston pick up your book, what do you hope that they recognize about their own lives and their own city in the pages?
I mean, it is my hope and wish that Houstonians see themselves. That would be the ultimate validation of Houstonians saying, yes, that's right. You know, that's what I hope, is that they recognize themselves, they recognize the places, and maybe even see more that something they drive right past every day or walk past and stop and just admire that beauty just for a second longer.
I love that. Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you so much.